Have you ever just looked at the cover of a game and been completely thrown off guard due to it being nothing like you imagined, but at the same time it being exactly what you thought it would be? That's Katherine. Looking at the cover, you're either greeted with Katherine lying face down accentuating her behind, or blonde Katherine teasingly showing off her cleavage. Which cover you got was dependent on which console you were playing on. Xbox players got Katherine lying down, while PlayStation got the blonde variant. This marketing strategy was actually genius by the team because it already gives you a taste of what the game was like before you ever even purchased it. It asks the question that every man knows: ass or tits? I know that it sounds ridiculous that it's a perfect analogy to set up this game, but it represents everything it is about. A surface level sexual appearance, but a choice between two options. No answer is particularly right, and it's all dependent on your own values. For some, that already turns them away, but as I'll go on to explain throughout the video, Katherine is so much more than its surface level appearance, while also being exactly that. The game was developed by Atlus. The company has 3 major departments that deal with their own projects. Katherine was made by the second creative production department, the same team best known for its work on the Shin Megami Tensei and Persona series. After the finishing touches were being put on Persona 4, everyone working there was ready to dip their toes into the new era of next-gen HD consoles. They'd been out for a few years at this point, but the company never quite got around to making a game utilizing the new system's hardware, and the end of Persona 4 seemed like a good time. They didn't want to begin work on a main entry game just yet, so they decided to experiment and try something new. What they needed was a test title to work out the kinks and get a feel for the new hardware they were working with, and that's where the idea for Katherine was conceived. Unlike their other popular titles, the team working on this sought out to make something unlike anything that they've done before it. There were 2 main deviations that came to mind. Firstly, the game wasn't to be in the role-playing genre as most of their titles were. Katherine was instead designed to be a puzzle game. And secondly, it was also targeted towards adults. The story and themes would be largely unrelatable to kids and teens alike. Both of these in tandem created a product that even the team working on the game wasn't expecting to do very well, and can you blame them? The words adult puzzle game doesn't exactly sound like it has the largest demographic to be successful. In fact, they even stated that only Atlus would ever be willing to fund such an idea. But a concept is only a concept. It's dependent on the people behind it to really get the product to flourish or wither. And fortunately, Katherine had a great team behind it. The team working on the game were no strangers to the gaming industry. In fact, they had 3 key staffers who are all veterans to the Persona franchise. Director and producer Katsura Hashino had helmed both entries of Persona 3 and 4, and he was now in charge of this game's vision as well. Hashino also brought in Yuichiro Tanaka, who had been the lead writer for the Persona games, to help bring these more adult and complex themes and subject matter to life. The art director and character designer Shigenori Sojima was too taken from the Persona games. As inspiration for these characters, both Vincent and Katherine were actually inspired by Billy and Layla from the 1998 movie Buffalo 66. Vincent's design you can almost exactly see, but with Katherine I almost missed it until I compared their white dress. Personality-wise, they share almost nothing in common, but aesthetically, it's pretty uncanny. And last but not least, the music was composed by the legendary Shoji Meguro, who I'm not convinced can make any bad piece of work. The music in this game had very clear direction. Terms like classic, adult-oriented, and erotic were key to shaping the overall atmosphere of this twisted game of love. It resulted in a very smooth jazz during the game's calmer moments and remixed classical during the action. With these 4 helming the project, Katherine was set to deliver gamers with something they had never experienced from Atlus before, and that it did. If you've played Atlus's Persona line of games, then you're probably familiar with its use of the tarot cards. Characters within the games will often be associated with one of them, and thematically their storyline will represent that card's meaning. And a similar approach was taken when conceptualizing the story of Katherine as well. But instead of focusing on all of the cards, it instead focused on just one, the Lover's Arcana. The Lover's card typically represents relationships and choices. It indicates some decision about an existing relationship, a temptation of the heart, or a choice of potential partners. Taking this concept, the storyline of Katherine was formed. In this game, you play as a 32-year-old man named Vincent Brooks. His life, to say the least, is at least for him, comfortable, but is quickly thrown into disarray when he begins having relationship problems from every conceivable angle. He enjoys the comfortability of his bachelor lifestyle, but his girlfriend Katherine is much more ambitious. She wants to get married, have kids, and settle down. Vincent would much rather prefer things stay the way they are because his life is calm. He's a computer programmer whose seeming goal is to simply wander aimlessly while avoiding the responsibilities of adulthood. This puts a strain on the two's relationship, and he soon finds himself waking up in nightmares, all thanks to a supposed curse known as the Woman's Wrath. Men in their late 20s suffering from relationship problems are gathered in their dreams where they are forced to climb a tower to seek salvation. If they don't or fail to climb the tower, they die in real life. Vincent and Katherine's relationship gets put on even rockier waters when Vincent has an affair with another girl also named Katherine, this one spelled with a C. Throughout the game, we see how either Vincent tries to recover from this accident or pursue it for a new future. The gameplay is split up into two different sections, day and nighttime. Night is where the majority of the game takes place. While here, you are forced to climb to the top of the tower via a block system so as not to be consumed by one of the various monsters chasing you. The harder the difficulty, the faster the floors fall out beneath you, giving you less time to formulate your strategy as you climb. These blocks contain their own advantages and disadvantages. The white blocks are your common blocks. They can be moved, pushed, pulled, and pose as the base for all of the others. The dark block is similar, however takes significantly longer to move, but has the advantage of being indestructible. Unmovable blocks do as they sound. They are stuck in place, unable to be interacted with, and can be a real pain in the ass, preventing you from doing whatever you want. That is, unless you use gravity to plunge them into the ether. Spring blocks are the most useful of them all as they spring the player up 5 block heights. But the spring block is the rarest to find, so you want to make sure to try and spot them when they're blending in. But be careful as they can equally send you into an unavoidable death. Every other block is designed to be a hindrance and make your life harder. Cracked blocks only allow you to step on them a few times before breaking. Ice blocks are everyone's favorite mechanic in any video game next to water levels. These blocks send you sliding forward uncontrollably until you reach the next non-ice block or fall off the map. Monster blocks are a slight nuisance as they can randomly move or knock Vincent down when he's hanging on them, but they can also be an accidental source of help moving into an unmovable position that helps you climb. Trap blocks impale you if you stand on them too long. Bomb blocks blow up after a set period of time, damaging all surrounding blocks, turning them into cracked blocks. Black hole blocks instantly kill you if you stand on top of it, and will eat any block above it. And mystery blocks can be anything. This system and layout of the maps makes for an engaging puzzle game as there's often not just one solution and method for how you climb. The core maps don't change, so depending on the difficulty you play on, you can get really good at mastering a specific level. In between stages, you can also interact with other sheep, and some of them offer techniques and strategies if you're a first timer. Most of them you're probably going to figure out as you play anyway, so they're not too important. But every now and then you can learn a technique you didn't know you can do, and they really help you on your way. Like take for example the Inazuma, which is incredibly helpful for climbing vertically within tight spaces. The spider is also one of the most common tactics that I frequently forget to do. All it is a method of hanging off of a block and shimmying around the side, but for some reason I'm always keen on pulling and pushing the blocks. But my bad habit has gotten better over time. The names for these techniques are more for show, so don't worry if they seem overwhelming, but are actually really useful for discerning what to do if, say, you're looking at a guide online. Probably one of my favorite parts of the game are the confessionals. It may sound silly because this game is meant to be a puzzle climber as you attempt to perfect your skills at recognizing patterns making you super efficient, but there's just something so fun about moral questions. In between the floors of the tower, you're greeted with a little hub space where you can converse with the other sheep, save your game, buy items, and so on. But to progress in the story, you're given these seemingly random questions you have to answer, and they're just super entertaining to think about. You'll often find yourself saying something along the lines of, "It depends." The answers are given in such a straightforward yes or no format with questions that are most serviceably in the gray. Like, for example, which is a better life, long and dull, or short but full? There's no right answer to this question, and it boils down to how you'd want your life to be if you had to pick one of the two. It does make you think about something that perhaps you haven't before. Personally, I'm more of a long and dull kind of guy. Another good one I had on one of my playthroughs was, which is harder, lying or being lied to? I think most people find it not too difficult to lie in and of itself, while being lied to kinda stings and is never a good feeling. But there are some fun ones thrown in as well, such as, are you a pervert? And if you picked up this game based on the cover, you already know. Or, would you rather kiss a cephalopod-like alien or a beautiful corpse? It's like a good version of one of those internet quizzes, just without the bad questions and ad revenue going to some crappy company. If you want to look at it from a technical standpoint, these answers do affect your morality meter at the end of the game. One answer represents order while the other chaos, so you can manipulate the answers in favor of whatever outcome you desire. But at least for your first playthrough, I would always recommend answering honestly and see where you wind up. Turns out, I'm very much in the order category, with very minor exceptions, which I don't mind at all. I did find myself siding with Katherine almost always. When you're not ascending the tower, you're at the Stray Sheep Bar, interacting with other patrons having similar nightmares and learning more about them. If you've played any of the Persona games, then this aspect will feel very familiar to the social links. The only difference is that you're exclusively limited to the bar and can't go anywhere else. Interacting with the others actually determines whether or not they live or die. Constantly talking to them and encouraging them as you come across them at the bar and in the nightmares ensures that they don't succumb to their fears. I actually found it a little difficult to get everyone to live, as you have to choose between dialogue options sometimes to make them feel better. On my initial playthrough, everyone but Daniel died despite being aware of this mechanic. Turns out I don't really know what to say to people to encourage them, even when I'm trying. Sorry everyone. Despite the team at Atlus not having much faith in the commercial success of this game, Katherine wound up being a surprise hit by both fans and critics alike. The game sold over 200,000 copies in just its first week alone, which at the time was Atlus's biggest opening week to date. Now we get to where I think this game truly shines, its story. Because Katherine is a single player game, I would 100% recommend you play it yourself and experience the whole thing blind. But if you've already played the game and don't care about me spoiling it, then let's continue. So throughout the first half of this game, the situation between Vincent and Katherine continues to escalate. What was originally an accidental one-night stand only continues to be a repeated occurrence, though he never has any memories of going home with her, and at times tries to avoid any involvement whatsoever, but always seems to wind up with her in his bed. Meanwhile, with actual Katherine, her progression gets increasingly pressured as well. What initially starts out about potentially taking the next step and getting married turns into the bombshell that she thinks that she's pregnant. Mix that together with the crazy woman you hardly know threatening to kill herself and you if she was being cheated on, and you find yourself a very worried man in the middle. But this all leads to one of my favorite parts of the story, and that's the introduction of Steve. About 3/4 of the way through the game, Vincent gets a call from a man named Steve who claims to be the boyfriend of Katherine. Vincent confronts Katherine about him, but she has no idea who this Steve guy is. And so the only other option it could be is his actual girlfriend. And we see a complete role reversal in Vincent's mentality. The whole game, he's been the one cheating, But now when he's the one possibly getting cheated on, he becomes much more aggressive, and we see how this prospect does upset and get to him. And he even worries that the baby might not be his, as presented in his nightmare of the now deformed baby from the previous boss fight. As the story progresses, we learn that Katherine, of course, isn't cheating on him at all. And she doesn't know anyone named Steve, and he must have had the wrong guy. My favorite part about this story was being able to immediately recognize how Vincent was projecting his own insecurities onto Katherine. The two have been dating for 5 years, and never has he brought up how he thinks that she might cheat on him, or that she's the type of person to cheat. But now that he's found himself cheating on her, he's now all of a sudden worried that she may be cheating on him. But as a resident Katherine stan, I always knew she would never do such a thing. If you know how each of these characters are, you'd know that Vincent would get worried and start projecting, and Katherine isn't the type of person to cheat in the first place. But the game truly reaches its boiling point when Vincent finally breaks it off with blonde Katherine. After a not so clean breakup where Vincent takes one straight on the jaw, the next morning he doesn't have any more nightmares. Katherine's no longer on his bedside, and it seems like he's figured out what he wants from life, and because of it, he's free and the curse is gone. The real Katherine then arrives wanting to speak, but when Vincent opens his door, who else appears but Katherine, throwing the scenario into the messiest it's ever been. The two worlds Vincent has tried so hard to keep unaware of each other finally collide, and Katherine holds back no punches.
Vincent, honey, you're not really gonna try and play dumb now, are you? After all you've done to my body, night after night? Ugh, you pig. If you work hard enough to get something, you'll get it. Don't you think that's true? Well, he worked me hard, and now he's got me. Simple as that.
The scene is super tense, and I got so infuriated my first time playing on behalf of the real Katherine. Getting cheated on is messed up enough, but to find out like this is even worse. And Vincent isn't helping the situation either.
So, can you ever forgive me?
She then goes to the kitchen to try and find a knife, only for other Katherine to already have it. The two get into a bit of a scuffle, resulting in Katherine getting a knife into her stomach and dying. Serves her right. When Vincent and Katherine try to leave, they are greeted by the Nightmare World, and Vincent has to escort Katherine to the top while being chased by the now twisted monster of other Katherine. The two make it all the way to the top, but Katherine is so distraught she almost tries to give up her own life. But Vincent is there to show her just how much she's changed since the start of the game, pleading for their relationship, their child, and their future to continue on, reaffirming the desire of his heart. When they get out of the nightmare, Katherine has no recollection of the events that just transpired. While Vincent is now ready to take a step into adulthood with his girlfriend, the game throws yet another bombshell on the player. Katherine has been noticing how strange Vincent has been throughout the entire game and is able to deduce that he's been cheating. And when confronted, he confesses. And so, she breaks up with him and leaves. All that hard work, finally deciding his future, was literally a moment too late. This whole sequence was so good. From here, everything begins to unfold. Vincent returns to the stray sheep only to uncover no evidence of Katherine ever existed, as none of his friends ever saw her. The only person for sure knows her is Boss, as he overheard him talking to her on the night they first met. Boss's identity as a god is revealed. As it turns out, he's been the one behind all of the nightmares, or at least he's taking orders from someone higher than him to do this. And Katherine is a succubus appearing to men in different forms to tempt their loyalty. This understandably pisses Vincent off, as his whole relationship has been ruined thanks to a literal demon making him think that he's been sleeping with her. Depending on your decisions throughout the game, Vincent will either pick one of the two Katherines to pursue them for a relationship, or reject them both for the freedom ending. There are 9 endings in total, 3 for each Katherine and 3 for freedom, with varying amounts of happy ending. Personally, I got the Katherine true ending, where Vincent managed to convince her to give him a second chance and they get married. This was always the outcome I was hoping to achieve out of this game, and was super pumped when it happened, as it's a true end to his story. Though the other Katherine's ending is also pretty hilarious. Vincent hooks up with her and moves to the underworld, where the two overthrow her father Nurgle, and he gets his own harem of succubi as its new demon king. The freedom ending is just him going to space as he's always wanted since he was a kid. Kind of bland, but I think the game was really trying to push you towards one of the two women. Katherine's story is so good, and it has the perfect balance of involving the player with the dialogue and having them sit back and enjoy the chaos. When the story's playing out, the game doesn't try and make you feel like you're interacting by pressing A for dialogue to advance or something. You don't need to touch your controller, and I love that. When things are chill, that's when you can move at your own pace, but for the most part, this game is moving at the pace it wants to move, and if you have a problem with that, you can skip the entire thing. While Katherine can easily be looked at as just some anime puzzle game where you run away from funny-looking monsters, there was a lot of thought into portraying the life and stress of Vincent. Each of the bosses are a manifestation of Vincent's fears he's been faced with. First is his struggling relationship with Katherine. Second is the iconic butt monster of other Katherine, as she was a sexual mistake. The bride appears when Katherine wants to get married, and the baby afterward when she's pregnant. Every new hurdle Vincent is faced with, he metaphorically and literally runs away from, scrambling to form any sort of ground beneath him so he can escape it. The blocks, him ascending the tower, is all one big metaphor for his life. But my favorite boss probably has to be the shadow of Vincent due to what exactly it represents. The monster starts out as a simple creature with a pristine mask covering its face. But the higher Vincent climbs, the mask slowly breaks away, revealing that it was him behind it. That, like him, the mask he hides behind in the real world is only so durable at disguising his emotions and everything he's ashamed of. His lack of responsibility, cheating on his girlfriend, everything he tries to keep behind a facade, it is inevitably going to break, and he has to make a decision and confront himself. It may not be my favorite to face puzzle-wise, but symbolically, I think it's pretty neat. If there's one thing the game does very well, is not judging the player for the path that they take. Whether you choose to pursue C. Katherine or K. Katherine, or neither of them, the game attempts to make it feel fulfilling, and it does so by giving everyone their own innate flaws. C. Katherine is a bit of an exception considering that she is a succubus designed to tempt the hearts of men, so she's fulfilling her role exactly how she's supposed to. So love her or hate her, it's her job. When it comes to Vincent, he's the one who thinks that he cheats, which is a pretty big flaw to give to someone. Plus, in addition to all of his other flaws, which are seemingly endless. He drinks, he smokes, he's irresponsible, his job is okay at best but not great, his place is a mess, the list goes on. But part of the initial inception of Vincent was that he was originally meant to be a fairly unlikable and unsympathetic character. It is possible that he was originally intended to have genuinely cheated on his girlfriend, and the story was simply deciding which life path he wanted to go down. But due to feedback from the staff, the storyline of Thomas Mutton was added to make Vincent a more sympathetic character. Katherine is a succubus who forced his way onto him, and he's just trying to fix everything. But well hidden and naturally in the game itself are Vincent's good traits. While it never calls direct attention to it, as you're most often focused on his cheating, when in the nightmare, he's an incredibly determined individual, even calming down and encouraging the other sheep he meets. He listens to their problems, quenches their fears, and tries to encourage them to keep on living and never give up. He's also kind to a fault. I know it seems odd considering the entire game you think that he's cheating on his pregnant girlfriend for some floozy he met at the bar, but his kindness is what makes it so difficult for him to not only confess to Katherine about what he did, but also break up with other Katherine, because in both scenarios he doesn't want to hurt them. Even when Katherine threatens to kill herself, he actively tries to avoid that outcome. Vincent is a good person, and that's probably why Katherine stuck around with him for so long. Speaking of which, then there's Katherine McBride. She is, by far, my favorite from this game, and the one I actually found to be the most sympathetic. While Vincent is the main character and ultimately the one going through everything, I found Katherine does little to actually warrant the things happening to her. The game paints her out to be boring or a buzzkill to the lax and free lifestyle that is Vincent. But I just found her to be a responsible person. She asks him to stop smoking, she's worried about his drinking and always being at the bar, as well as his lack of cleanliness of his room, asking that he pick up after himself. Considering that I don't smoke, drink, and like to have a clean room, I think all those requests are reasonable on her end. Plus, she's always the one texting you, making sure that you're alright. If there's one thing you could genuinely fault her for, it's the pressuring of Vincent into life decisions. She knows what she wants in life, and these include a marriage and a child, and she works towards these things, which you should never fault anyone against. But as for Vincent, he isn't sure about those things, and she doesn't often try to take his feelings or readiness into account. But this is kind of already addressed in the game.
I mean, it's easy to keep things like they are now, but...
I don't know. Sometimes easy's best, right? I mean, who knows what'll happen in the future?
What Vincent wants is life to stay the same, and so if she doesn't push, she's never going to make any headway, so it's kind of a double-edged sword on her end. Perhaps dropping the bombshell on him that she might be pregnant wasn't the best strategy, but what else are you supposed to do when he's always shooing you away and there's never any time to just talk? But despite this slight flaw, I found it in no way, shape, or form justified the concept of cheating. Especially how Vincent responds to everything, even in the path to the good ending, how he describes it as a mistake and he's broken it off with the other Katherine.
I was just confused. I am done with her, okay? And I won't ever see her again. Plus, I was gonna apologize to you. It's true, so please, forgive me.
At no point did I ever feel like she deserved to get cheated on. What she deserved was the truth, and she was always trying to get the truth through Vincent's lies. It genuinely made me upset and feel so bad for her during this game. But I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the lore and true ending of this game. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, then it may sound weird, but the story of Katherine and Vincent doesn't conclude once the credits roll. Especially with this talk of gods that gets brought up towards the end of the game. Boss talks about how he's simply carrying out the will of someone known as Ishtar, and how they are really the ones responsible for everything that's happening. But we never find out anything about them. That is, unless you played the Babel game mode. This part of the game is unlocked by getting gold awards in the main story and is the most difficult thing to do in this game. Get gold on all chapters and you will unlock all of the Babel. Once you unlock these stages, your real skill will be put to the test, and if you can beat everything, you'll be rewarded with all of the answers that you were waiting for. Everything you need to know comes from Trisha, the hostess of the Golden Playhouse. You guys remember her, right? I mean, how can you not? Sweet, seductive tone and the giant red afro really leaves a mark. She first introduced Vincent at the start of this game, and she welcomes you to the other game modes, including the Babel as well. As it would turn out, Trisha isn't just the presenter of this game. She is actually Ishtar, the goddess of fertility and the one Boss serves, and the one who was causing the mysterious deaths to happen in the first place. This twist I really didn't see coming and caught me by genuine surprise. She was also Azeroth, the one asking you questions in between stages in the confessionals as well.
Allow me to introduce myself. The name Trisha was just an alias. My true name is Ishtar. I am the goddess of fertility governing the world's love. Trisha? Ishtar. Who doesn't love a good anagram? Hey man, don't look at me like that. I had to leave some kind of clue, right? It'd be worse if no one figured it out, wouldn't it?
As it turns out, her story is actually completely separate of everything that happened in the game. For her story, in reality, she grew tired of Boss's cheating and was in search of a new consort. The game itself and the Babel was to help her find it. It's not Vincent, but the person controlling Vincent that she has her eyes on. That's right, us. The player in this case. Upon completing the babble, she accepts us as her new love consort, lets her hair down, and we get a true happy ending.
Are you gonna make me stand around like this much longer? Why don't you let me in? Well, will you? Well then, congratulations. And now, let's celebrate.
I always love things like this that reward completionists with more secret content. It makes everything feel more worth for all that time that you put in. I can't even imagine the amount of people who were huge fans of the main story but didn't complete the babble and had no idea that this part of the game ever existed. Katherine was such a commercial and financial success for Atlus that they made the game again in 2019 as Katherine Full Body. The term full body was chosen not only due to its sexual nature, but also its relation to full-bodied wine. The idea that, like wine, this edition would provide much more than the original. New content, new story, and even a new love interest was added to the game. The entirety of the original was ported over to Atlus's own in-house engine, the same one that was used for Persona 5. Everything does look a bit more vibrant, though to me it looks as though the saturation was just turned up. In terms of the gameplay, quite a few changes were made. Items function a little differently from before. The block item used to create a single square which allowed you to ascend up one space, but now it forms a 3x3 grid on your level, giving you more ground to move around on. The energy drink used to allow you to climb up 2 block spaces for a set amount of time, but now you only have 3 uses, but it's up to you on when you use them. The others more or less work the exact same. Now, considering that I played both of these games back to back for this video, I noticed that in Full Body, Vincent's movements in the Nightmare are a lot more sluggish and it doesn't feel great in comparison. I found myself thinking that I deserved to die multiple times to trap blocks because my character model was still fully above them when the spikes came out, whereas in the original, Vincent moved so fast it felt like he was barely escaping them by the skin of his teeth. So climbing in this game doesn't feel as fast or responsive as the original. The story remains exactly the same as the original, only with the inclusion of a third love interest named Rin. There's one detail about Rin that's pretty hard to keep spoiler-free when talking about them, so be aware that I'm going to be spoiling Katherine Full Body as well if you've somehow managed to make it this far still worrying about spoilers. But anyway, the whole twist of Rin is that she's actually a guy. Despite the cute outward appearance and feminine voice, Rin is a male and identifies as one. Kind of. You'll see what I mean when I get to the endings. He initially runs into Vincent when fleeing a seemingly monstrous entity. After a classic anime whoopsie, we learn that Rin has no memories at all, and because of that, Vincent begins looking out for him. He gets him a room next to his and even a job playing piano at the Stray Sheep. In the absolute chaos that becomes Vincent's life and affair, in Full Body he begins to fall for Rin as well, particularly the idea that she accepts him for who he is and doesn't want him to change. This is especially prevalent in Rin's case due to being a boy, as he feels Vincent likes him for him and isn't the type to judge. This winds up not being the case as Vincent accidentally walks in on a naked Rin on the floor where he learns the truth. Vincent's initial reaction is quite negative and really hurts Rin's feelings, so he runs away. At this point in the game, if you weren't working towards Rin's love route, everything will pretty much play out as it did in the original. But if you did, then you will obviously pursue Rin as Vincent's new romantic love interest. Throughout the game, Vincent learns to accept and love Rin for himself without caring what other people think. If you get Rin's true ending, then we learn that he's actually part of an ancient alien race that's been on Earth providing it miracles throughout history. And it was due to this special nature that Rin was able to infiltrate the nightmares and assist Vincent on his climb. The two wind up getting married and travel through space with Rin playing piano and Vincent as his producer. The whole alien thing is pretty weird and doesn't fit in with all of the other lore. I mean, Katherine is a succubus and Boss is a god, but aliens? They really did come out of nowhere. If I'm being completely blunt here, I think Katherine Full Body is the inferior version of this game. The addition of Rin really throws off the balance the story had, as the game does seem to focus a lot of its attention on him. Don't get me wrong, Rin is a great character, he's super adorable, and going through his love route is incredibly sweet, as love is more than just gender. I don't dislike Rin, but within the narrative of Katherine, he shifted everything outside of his own storyline downward. What I loved about the original was how raw it was. It was about a man who cheated on his girlfriend, and he was trying to fix that mistake. Things get sexual with Katherine, but it was always grounded in reality, as you weren't supposed to know that she was a succubus. But with Rin, literally the first thing we see is a giant monster chasing him, immediately followed by a crotch in the face. Things went from serious and grounded in reality to anime. And most of the scenes involving Rin are like this as well. They're much more over the top. Remember that scene I was talking about where both Katherines met face to face? That scene was so tense. You're on the edge of your seat and you're practically holding your breath for its entirety. It's not until the entire thing is over that you learn that it was all a dream. But during it, you had no idea, and why would you? You're meant to feel like you are Vincent in the moment. So when he pours his heart out not wanting to lose his girlfriend, the whole thing feels so real. And that would be lost if you knew that upon opening the door, it was a dream. But in Rin's version of this scene, here's how things start out.
Rin, there's something that I need to tell you.
I'm not gonna lie, it's a pretty good beginning to this whole scene, but as it progresses, things get way too ridiculous. Katherine is in his apartment with an axe trying to kill him, and blonde Katherine returns with a chainsaw. The two try to kill Vincent and then each other, which results in absolute carnage. He's then saved by Rin where they climb up the tower. Suspension of disbelief is long gone before the entire scene is over. Yeah, it's pretty over the top, but compared to the tense nail-biter of the original, the whole thing is so silly and you can immediately tell that this isn't reality. But the thing that got me the most is how Vincent treats him. In the original, it felt like Vincent could never catch a break. Everything that he was doing was only making the situation worse. And that amplified the feeling that he needed to grow up and take responsibility to tell the truth. With Rin, Vincent is everything Katherine wants him to be. He takes responsibility and helps someone with amnesia, found them a place to stay, and even got them a job. When Vincent talks to Rin, he's very open and asks him how he's doing and talks about his own problems and feelings to him. All of the things that were absent in the original Katherine. Vincent had a distinct inability to open up and just say what he was going through or how he was feeling. There's even a moment in this game right after Vincent learns Rin's gender where he runs into Katherine and completely blows her off, being as ambiguous as ever and not caring about her feelings but Rin's. He's so worried about the new character's feelings and continues to completely ignore his actual girlfriend. He gives Rin his phone to make sure that he's safe and can stay in contact. And he stands up for him at the bar when being harassed. He's practically being super responsible, like a father figure to Rin. And yet the game still tries to get me to believe that Vincent isn't ready to have such responsibilities. It was so effective in the original because Vincent never seemed ready. It was like he was trying to avoid all responsibilities but still wind up with a happy ending. The way Vincent interacts with Rin is everything Katherine wants out of him, but for some reason, he's not nearly as open and honest with her. That's why I'm not a fan of Rin's role in everything. In and of itself, the story is sweet, but it's not a self-contained story. It's shoehorned in with an already existing narrative, so his whole character feels out of place because he is. It was like trying to balance an already perfectly balanced seesaw by adding a third pivot. It just wasn't going to happen. If there's one new addition I absolutely loved, it was the addition of the Backstories. In between the floors, the developers added fully animated scenes from Vincent and Katherine's past, and these scenes absolutely made my heart melt. Seeing how happy the two were, meeting in high school, sleeping together, and becoming boyfriend and girlfriend, aside from being super adorable, it gives us some insight on their past, particularly the type of man Vincent used to be. We see how he's a fun-going guy, but he's also asking about Katherine's feelings and checking up on her. Something that in modern day he no longer does or is. I remember constantly asking myself during the original, why is Katherine sticking with him? Vincent seemed so terrible for her and didn't seem to hold any of the same values as she did, so I was constantly in my head about why she didn't just break up with him. But it did lead me to think that Katherine must see something in him that we don't. She's a very smart woman, so she had to have been experienced to a side of him that she thinks is worth the effort. And in Full Body, we get to see that side of him and how much he's really changed, or not changed. They even added more alternate endings for both Katherines as well. Blonde Katherine's true ending was updated, so if you pick her, she actually rewinds time itself, and Vincent will be transported back to high school where Katherine appears as a transfer student. Instead of falling in love with the original Katherine, he instead pursues the other Katherine and they grow up becoming lovebirds. They get married and even have children. As for the original Katherine, she wound up with Paul. That's right, that Paul.
That Paul?
Kay Katherine's ending is quite the opposite. After confronting Vincent about his cheating, it makes her feel kinda bad, wondering if she's not attractive. She gets invited to a party called the Brand New Me and joins a fashion magazine. She winds up becoming super popular and even blows off Vincent to gain her own sense of freedom.
I always felt tied down, constrained by expectations of who I should be, but now I've realized something. People can be free, and I have you to thank for that. Vincent! You take that freedom, and go live your life!
I don't mean to continue to sound overly negative about this game, but I hold the original in such high regard due to how purposeful everything felt. But in both Rin and Katherine's new ending, he gets married. I get the prospect of giving the players an outcome that they themselves probably want. If they pursued one of the three, there should probably be an option to marry all three in each of their best endings. But what I don't like about it is that it doesn't make sense for him to marry Katherine or Rin. The whole point of the story about his relationship problems with Katherine is that he's too irresponsible and doesn't want to get married or have a kid. The true ending of Katherine was his final character development, showing that he was ready to take the next step into adulthood. It was the evolution of his character from the beginning of the game if you wanted to pursue that path. While other Katherine's ending, he embraces the chaos of being a bachelor. What single man doesn't want his own harem of women? There was a point to choosing a path, but in Full Body, there is no point. The whole reason he fell for Rin was he didn't judge him for who he was. So theoretically, their ending should have been Vincent not changing at all. He gets married to all three characters without reason for two of them. It makes it out to seem that his relationship problems with Katherine were that they just didn't get along. I feel these endings wind up ruining the message of this entire game, trying to satisfy its players. I get that it's sweet seeing Vincent get married in all of these best endings, but the original had a rhyme and reason for its endings. I just think that if you're going to experience Katherine, try experiencing the original first. The story feels much more balanced and realized. Yeah, Full Body has all of the same scenes as the original, but Rin does unfortunately bring the quality down because he wasn't designed to be in the story. Honestly, I can't really blame Atlus for expecting this game not to do well. It's vastly different to anything that they've made before it, and I would love to see other games produced that are a bit different from their role-playing game wheelhouse. I'm not looking for a Katherine 2. In fact, I think if anything, the creative team could make other original stories focusing on the other tarot cards. Since this one was The Lovers, there's about 20 other major arcanas they could craft stories around as well. It's kind of ironic that this game was designed to break away from the type of titles that they were known for. It took risks, targeted a specific demographic that they thought wasn't going to be very popular, but the opposite wound up happening. Fans fell in love with it, and it became just as popular as their other games. But in doing so, another title similar has yet to be released. The risk that Katherine took has yet to be taken again, and that's quite unfortunate. While Katherine on the surface appears to be a very erotic game that just so happens to have puzzles, in reality it was a story that explored deep themes of relationships and adulthood. I think a lot of players can relate to Vincent and his fear of responsibility, or even Katherine and her dreams of advancing her life, or perhaps other Katherine and just being horny. Whether it be a relationship or freedom, the game doesn't judge you for whatever path you choose and instead accepts it because, like real life, there is no right answer. There is just a path of decisions which lead you to the person you really are and ultimately want to be. Behind the guise of pink polka-dotted underwear and talking sheep was a meaningful game that took risks with what it wanted to say. Katherine is one of my favorite titles by Atlus, and for good reason. I may be more like Vincent at the start of this game, but I'm looking to be more like him by its end.